I was at my desk when the text came through. It was 4 p.m. on a Saturday, 3 hours before my father's birthday dinner. The message was from my husband, Marcus. Change the reservation to my name. My regional manager is in town. I need that table to close this promotion. Your dad would be more comfortable at a sports bar anyway. I read it twice. My hands stayed still on the keyboard. My breathing didn't change. There was just this sudden quiet in my chest, like someone had closed a heavy door. He hadn't asked. He'd already called the restaurant and switched the name on the booking. He thought it was done. He thought I'd scramble to find a backup plan while he entertained his boss at the table I'd reserved. I typed back 6 words. My brother owns that restaurant. He left me on red. He didn't believe me. He didn't listen. And that was the last mistake he'd make as my husband. My father, Tom, had spent 40 years with engine grease under his fingernails. He was a mechanic. The kind who could tell what was wrong with a car just by listening to it idle. He didn't have a degree or a corner office. He had rough hands, a small shop that smelled like motor oil and coffee, and a work ethic that never quit. He raised me by himself after my mother left. Double shifts to pay for my books and my braces. He never complained. He never asked for recognition. He just did what needed to be done. Then there was Marcus, my husband of 3 years. Marcus didn't fix things. He sold them. He worked in sales for a software company, but if you asked him, he was building an empire. He was obsessed with appearances. He pressed his shirts until they looked starched. He leased a car he couldn't afford just so clients would see him pull up in something sleek. He treated life like a stage performance where everyone who mattered was watching. The difference between my father and Marcus wasn't just obvious, it was painful. When Dad came over for dinner, he'd scrub his hands 3 times before touching anything in our apartment. He sat carefully on the couch, like he was afraid to leave a mark. Marcus would watch him with this tight smile that never reached his eyes. It wasn't kindness, it was tolerance. Marcus looked down on my father. He never said it directly, but I felt it. The way he'd make a comment about blue-collar work. The way he'd change the subject when Dad talked about the shop. To Marcus, my father represented everything he was running from, and nothing represented success to Marcus more than the harbor view. It was a restaurant on the waterfront in San Francisco, all dark wood and floor-to-ceiling windows. It wasn't the kind of place you could just book online. You needed a connection. There was a waiting list that stretched months for regular people, but the real power players, the executives, the venture capitalists, the old money families, they walked right in. Marcus was obsessed with it. He checked their social media constantly. He networked with anyone who might know someone. To him, eating there wasn't about the food. It was about validation. It was proof that he'd made it. For my father's 65th birthday, I wanted to give him something special. Something he'd never do for himself. I wanted him to sit by the window, look out at the bay, and have a meal that felt like celebration. So I got a reservation. Marcus didn't know how I managed it. He just knew I had it. And from the moment I told him I had a table for 4 at 7 on Saturday night, I saw something shift in his expression. He didn't see a birthday dinner for a mechanic. He saw an opportunity. And like everything else in my life, he decided it was too valuable to waste on my family. We lived in a condo that belonged to Marcus's parents. On paper, it looked generous. Marcus told everyone we were saving money to buy our own place by staying there. In reality, I wasn't a tenant. I was a checkbook with a pulse. It started small. A grocery run here, a utility payment there. But then came the renovation. 2 months ago, Marcus came home with a folder full of contractor estimates. He dropped them on the kitchen counter while I was making dinner. "Mom wants to upgrade the master bathroom," he said, loosening his tie. "Marble countertops, new fixtures, heated floors. It's going to look amazing." I glanced at the total. $15,000. "That's nice," I said. "I'm sure they'll enjoy it." Marcus laughed. Not a real laugh. "No, Jess, we're paying for it. Or you are, technically." My commission doesn't come through until next month, and the contractor needs the deposit this week. I stopped stirring. Excuse me? It's an investment, he said, using that tone he reserved for explaining obvious things. We live here rent-free. This increases the property value. It's basically equity. And after everything my parents have done for us, welcoming you into the family despite... He paused. You know, your background. It's the least we can do. There it was. I grew up in a small apartment with a single parent who worked himself to exhaustion just to keep the lights on. I watched other families take vacations and buy new cars while we patched clothes and counted change. You develop a belief, somewhere deep down, that stability is something you don't deserve, that you have to earn it, that you're lucky anyone accepts you at all. Marcus and his family knew that. They sensed it the way predators sense weakness. They'd convinced me that their approval was a privilege I needed to pay for. I wasn't a wife. I was a charity case they'd graciously allowed into their lives. Every bill I paid, every insult I swallowed, every check I wrote, I was buying my way into a family I thought was better than mine. I looked at Marcus. I looked at the estimate, and I felt that familiar weight pressing down on my chest. I didn't want to be ungrateful. I didn't want to be the burden. So, I wrote the check. $15,000 from my savings. Money I'd earned managing logistics for a distribution company. 50-hour weeks. Problem-solving that kept supply chains running smoothly. Perfect, Marcus said, taking the check before the ink dried. Mom will be thrilled. He didn't say thank you. He just walked out. They started construction the next week. Marcus's mother, Linda, came by every day to supervise. She'd comment on how I kept the place, criticizing the way I organized the kitchen while workers tore apart the bathroom I'd paid for. She treated me like I was squatting in her space. Even though my money was paying for the marble she'd picked out, I realized then that I hadn't bought respect. I'd bought a gilded cage, and I was barely allowed to stand on the heated floors I'd funded. The week of my father's birthday, Marcus was wound tight. His regional manager was flying in from Seattle that same Saturday. Marcus had been trying for weeks to get a table at the Harbor View. He'd called in every favor he had. He'd refreshed the reservation app until his phone battery died. Nothing. On Thursday night, I came home to find him standing in the living room staring at his phone. He looked up when I walked in. His eyes narrowed. "You have a reservation," he said. Not a question. A statement. I set my bag down. "Yes, for my dad's birthday. I told you about this." "I saw the confirmation on your laptop," he said. "Saturday at 7, prime table overlooking the water." He stepped closer. "How did you get it? I've been trying for a month." "I know someone," I said simply. "It's for Dad. It's his 65th. Cancel it." The air went still. "What?" "Cancel the reservation," Marcus said, his voice hardening. "Or transfer it to me. I need that table, Jess. Greg is expecting the best. If I take him to some second-rate steakhouse, I look weak. If I walk him into the Harbor View on a Saturday night, I look like someone who matters. I get the promotion. We get the raise." "No," I said. "It's my father's birthday." Marcus made a sound between a laugh and a scoff. "Be realistic, Jess. Your dad is a mechanic. He drinks domestic beer. He wouldn't know fine dining if it hit him in the face. He'd be uncomfortable there anyway. He'll embarrass himself just by showing up." "He's my father," I said quietly. "He's nobody," Marcus snapped. "That's just the truth. Don't drag me down trying to pretend otherwise. Give me that confirmation code or you can forget about me covering any expenses next month. You want to play the independent woman? Fine. See how that works out for you." I walked away. I locked the bedroom door behind me. I didn't give him the code, but I underestimated him. While I was in the shower the next morning, he went through my phone. He found the email. He forwarded it to himself. Then he called the restaurant, pretending to be me, and changed the reservation to his name. I didn't know until Saturday afternoon when that text arrived, the one telling me my dad belonged at a sports bar. He thought he'd won. He thought he'd outsmarted me. He didn't realize he'd just walked into something he couldn't see coming. Saturday evening came quietly. The fog was rolling in off the bay, softening the edges of the city. I picked up my father in my car. He was wearing his good suit, the charcoal one he'd bought years ago for my grandmother's funeral. It was a little snug across the shoulders now, but his shoes were polished until they caught the light. He looked nervous. "You sure about this place?" he asked as we drove. "Looks pretty fancy from the pictures. Maybe we should just grab burgers." "Not tonight, Dad," I said. "Tonight you eat like you deserve to." We pulled up to the valet stand. The harbor view sat at the edge of the wharf, all glass and warm light spilling out onto the wet pavement. We walked inside. The lobby smelled like expensive cologne and wood smoke. The floors were polished marble. Soft jazz played from hidden speakers. The host looked up from his podium. His expression was professional, neutral. "Reservation for Jess," I said clearly. He tapped his screen, frowned, tapped again. "I see the reservation, ma'am, but it appears your party has already been seated. Table 12 by the window." "I see," I said. My voice was calm. "Thank you." I led my father into the main dining room. It was full. Low conversations, the clink of silverware on china, candles flickering on white tablecloths, and there, at the prime corner table overlooking the water, sat Marcus. He was leaning in, laughing at something his boss was saying. That eager, too loud laugh he used when he was trying to impress someone. Linda and his father Gerald were there too, drinking wine, looking comfortable, looking entitled. Marcus saw us first. His smile froze. Then it hardened into something cold. He stood up and walked over, blocking our path like a security guard. "What are you doing here?" he said quietly, his voice tight. "You stole my reservation, Marcus," I said, loud enough that the nearby tables could hear. "I repurposed it," he corrected, glancing back at his boss nervously. "Look at him, Jess. Look at his suit. He doesn't belong here. He looks like he's here to fix the plumbing, not eat the food. Take him somewhere he'll actually be comfortable. Go." My father's shoulders slumped slightly. His eyes dropped to the floor. "No," I said. "We're not leaving." Marcus grabbed my arm. "You're making a scene. Leave now, or I swear you won't have a place to come home to tonight." That was the moment. I pulled my arm free. I didn't look at Marcus. I looked past him toward the back of the restaurant, toward the kitchen doors. I raised my hand. Not a wave, a signal. The double doors swung open. The dining room went quiet. My brother walked out. He wasn't wearing a server's uniform. He was wearing chef's whites, crisp and clean, with his name embroidered across the chest. He didn't walk. He moved through the room like he owned it. Because he did. The staff straightened. The host bowed his head slightly. The servers stepped aside. He walked straight past Marcus without even glancing at him. He walked right up to my father. "Happy birthday, Dad," he said. His voice carried in the silence. He hugged him, didn't care about the cheap suit or the nervous energy, just held him. Then he turned. Slowly. He looked at Marcus, who was standing there pale and frozen. He looked at the regional manager, who was staring in confusion. He looked at Linda and Gerald, who had stopped mid-sip. "I believe," my brother said, his voice cold and clear, "you're sitting at my father's table." For a few seconds, nobody moved. The only sound was the faint music in the background and someone's fork hitting a plate 2 tables over. The regional manager, Greg, looked from my brother to Marcus, his eyebrows raised. Marcus blinked. His brain was trying to catch up, trying to rewrite what was happening. He stood up straighter, smoothing his jacket, that desperate smile appearing on his face. "David," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "I didn't know you were working tonight. Greg, this is Jess's brother. We go way back. I actually planned this as a surprise for her dad. Right, Jess? A surprise?" His eyes were pleading with me to go along with it. Stop talking, Marcus, David said. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. David snapped his fingers. A server appeared immediately, placing a leather folder on the table in front of Greg. What is this? Marcus asked. We haven't even ordered yet. This isn't for the food, David said. His gaze was fixed on Marcus. Greg, my brother-in-law here likes to present himself as successful, as a provider, but the truth is, he's been living off my sister for 3 years. Greg opened the folder. He adjusted his glasses and started reading. Bathroom renovation, David said, reciting from memory. Marble countertops, heated floors, custom fixtures, $15,000, paid in full by Jess, monthly utilities, insurance, property taxes for a condo he doesn't own, another $1,800 a month, also paid by Jess. David leaned forward, placing his hands on the table. Total amount my sister has paid to support this man and his parents over the last 3 years, $62,000. Amount Marcus has contributed to their shared household, 0. Linda gasped. Gerald stared into his wine glass. Marcus turned red. You can't just... You set me up, Marcus suddenly shouted. The dining room went completely silent. You planned this. You brought me here just to humiliate me in front of my boss. He spun toward me, his finger pointed at my face. You lied to me. You told me your brother was just a cook. You hid this. You hid his success. You tricked me into looking like an idiot. I didn't hide anything, Marcus, I said. My voice was steady. You never asked? You were too busy mocking my father's job to notice his son built this place. Marcus was breathing hard, his face dark red. His hands were shaking. She's manipulating you, he said to Greg, his voice desperate. She let me pay for things. She let me think. She made me believe. Made you believe what? David interrupted. That you were the provider? That you were supporting her? When she was the one paying for everything? Greg set the folder down slowly. He looked at Marcus with an expression I recognized. Not anger, just disappointment. The kind reserved for something fundamentally broken. Marcus, Greg said quietly, sit down. You're embarrassing yourself. But sir, I didn't know. I said sit down. Marcus collapsed into his chair. His chest was heaving. His eyes darted around the room, looking for an exit that wasn't there. The illusion was gone. The successful executive, the man on the rise, all of it stripped away in front of the one person whose opinion he needed most. Greg stood up. He buttoned his jacket with a finality that felt louder than any words. He didn't look at Marcus. He looked at me, then at David. I apologize for this disruption, he said, his tone clipped and professional. Then he turned to Marcus. Don't come into the office on Monday. You're suspended pending review. If you've been misrepresenting your expenses to me the way you've misrepresented your life to your wife, we're going to have a serious problem. The promotion, Marcus whispered. The promotion is for someone with integrity, Greg said, not someone who lives off other people and calls it success. He walked out. Linda and Gerald sat frozen, their wine untouched. They looked at Marcus, then at me, waiting for me to fix it, to smooth things over, to write another check and make the problem disappear like I always did. But I was done. I took off my wedding ring. It was simple, plain silver. Marcus had bought it during his lean years, promising to upgrade it later. He never did. I placed it on the leather folder, right on top of the financial summary David had printed. Jess, Marcus said hoarsely, reaching for my hand. Don't. We can fix this. I was under pressure. I made mistakes, but we can... You weren't under pressure, Marcus, I said. You were under the delusion that I existed to fund your image instead of being your partner. I looked at him, really looked at him, and I felt nothing. No anger, no hurt. Just the clean clarity of a ledger finally balanced. The renovation, I said, pointing to the folder. The marble, the heated floors, The fixtures? Consider that my parting gift. That $15,000 is your severance package. I turned to my father, who was standing quietly beside me. Ready to eat, Dad? Starving, he said. We didn't eat in the main dining room. David led us through the kitchen, past the line cooks who were plating dishes with precision, into a private room in the back. It was smaller, warmer. The table was set with simple white plates and good silverware. It smelled like garlic and fresh bread. We sat down, just the three of us. David brought out steaks that had been dry-aged for 30 days, roasted vegetables with olive oil and sea salt, a bottle of wine that cost more than Marcus's car payment. My father cut into his steak, took a bite, closed his eyes. This, he said, shaking his head. This is something. We ate slowly. We talked about the shop, about Dad's plans to finally take a vacation, about David's new menu for the spring. Nobody mentioned Marcus. Nobody needed to. As I sat there, watching my father laugh at something David said, I thought about Marcus sitting alone in that cold dining room, about Linda and Gerald trying to figure out how to explain this to their friends. There's a kind of poverty that has nothing to do with bank accounts. It's the poverty of believing that appearances matter more than reality, that what other people think of you is more important than who you actually are. Marcus wore expensive clothes and leased luxury cars, but inside he was empty. My father wore a 20-year-old suit and drove a truck with 200,000 miles on it, but he was the wealthiest person I knew. I'd spent 3 years trying to buy acceptance at a table where I was never truly welcome. I didn't realize until tonight that I'd been building my own table all along, and the view from here was exactly right. We stayed at the restaurant until almost midnight. The kitchen staff filtered out gradually, calling goodbyes to David as they left. The dining room had emptied hours ago. I didn't ask what happened to Marcus. I didn't need to know. When we finally walked out to the parking lot, the fog had thickened. The streetlights created halos in the mist. My father hugged me before getting into his truck. You didn't have to do all this, he said quietly. Yes, I did, I said. He nodded, understood without me having to explain. I drove home alone, not to the condo. I went to a hotel downtown, something simple and clean where nobody knew my name. I sat on the bed and opened my laptop. The joint bank account showed activity from 2 hours ago. Marcus had tried to transfer money out, $12,000, moving to his personal account. The transaction had been declined. I'd locked the account that morning, before I even picked up my father. I'd known what Marcus would do the moment things fell apart. He'd try to grab whatever he could on his way out, but I'd already moved everything that mattered. My savings, my investment accounts, even the security deposit for the condo, all transferred to accounts with only my name. Marcus was left with exactly what he'd contributed. Nothing. I closed the laptop and looked out the window at the city lights bleeding through the fog. There was a knock at the door around 1 a.m. I knew who it was before I opened it. David stood in the hallway, still wearing his chef's whites, holding a paper bag. Thought you might be hungry, he said. I let him in. He'd brought leftover bread and a container of the soup he made for staff meal. We sat on the floor by the window and ate in silence for a while. How long have you known? He asked finally. Known what? That it was bad. I set down my spoon. About a year, but I kept thinking I could make it work, that if I just contributed more, if I was just easier to deal with, he'd start seeing me as a person instead of a resource. David shook his head. That's not how people like him work. They don't see effort. They see weakness. Every time you gave in, you were just teaching him you would. I know that now. You should have told me sooner. I was embarrassed, I said. You built this whole successful business. Dad raised us with nothing and made it work, and I couldn't even maintain a marriage without funding it like a failing startup. That's not failure, David said. That's finally stopping the bleeding. He was right, but it would take time for it to feel that way. The next morning, I went back to the condo while Marcus was at work. or wherever he went after being suspended. I packed methodically. Clothes, documents, the few things that were actually mine. The place was full of stuff I'd paid for but didn't want. The couch, the kitchen appliances, the art on the walls. Let him keep it all. I was taking the only things that mattered. I was loading the last box into my car when Linda pulled into the driveway. She got out slowly, holding her purse like a shield. "Jess," she said, "we need to talk." "No, we don't. Marcus made mistakes, but he loves you. He's just under a lot of pressure at work. If you could just..." "Just what?" I turned to face her. "Write another check? Pretend last night didn't happen? Go back to being the silent ATM that funds your family's lifestyle?" Linda's face tightened. "We welcomed you into this family. We gave you a place to live when you had nothing." "I had plenty," I said. "You gave me a place to live so I could pay for your renovations. There's a difference. You're being very ungrateful." "No," I said. "I'm being very done." I got in my car and drove away. In the rearview mirror, I saw her standing in the driveway, holding her purse, looking smaller than she ever had before. The divorce papers were filed by Wednesday. Marcus tried to call 17 times that first week. I didn't answer. He sent emails, long ones, full of apologies that somehow always circled back to excuses, full of promises that somehow always included conditions. I didn't reply. His lawyer sent a letter claiming I had abandoned the marriage and demanding half of my savings as part of the settlement. My lawyer sent back documentation of every dollar I'd paid into Marcus's life over 3 years. Every renovation, every bill, every expense. The demands stopped. 2 months later, I signed the lease on a small apartment in the marina. Nothing fancy, just 1 bedroom with a view of the bay and space that was entirely, completely mine. I unpacked slowly, hung my own art, bought a couch I actually liked instead of one that looked impressive. I didn't hear from Marcus again after the divorce was finalized. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he'd moved back in with his parents, that the suspension had turned into a termination after an audit found irregularities in his expense reports, that he was working at a different firm now, something smaller, something where nobody cared about his image. I didn't feel satisfaction hearing that. I just felt distance, the kind that comes with closing a door you should have closed years ago. 4 months after the divorce was finalized, I went back to the harbor view for the first time, not for a celebration, just for dinner on a quiet Tuesday night. David saw me come in. He walked out from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. "You should have called ahead," he said. "I would have saved you the best table." "I wanted to just walk in like a normal person," I said. He smiled. "Understood." He sat me at a table by the window, not the corner booth where Marcus had sat, somewhere different, somewhere with a better view. I ordered the special, drank a glass of wine, watched the boats moving across the water. About halfway through my meal, a woman approached my table. She was maybe 30, wearing business casual, holding her phone nervously. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said, "but I was here a few months ago. I saw what happened with your husband, with the reservation." I set down my fork. "Okay. I just wanted to say thank you," she continued. "I was with my boyfriend that night. He'd been doing the same thing to me, making me pay for everything, treating me like I was lucky he stayed. Watching what you did that night, it made me realize I didn't have to accept it." She paused. "I left him 2 weeks later. I just thought you should know." She walked away before I could respond. I sat there for a moment, fork in hand, feeling something shift. I hadn't just changed my own life that night. I'd shown someone else that it was possible to change theirs. By the end of summer, I'd been promoted at work. The company offered me a position managing operations for the entire West Coast. More responsibility, better pay, a chance to actually use the skills I'd been developing instead of using them to subsidize someone else's ego. I took it. My father came over to help me celebrate. We grilled on my tiny balcony, drank cheap beer, watched the sun set over the bay. "You seem lighter," he said after a while. I am. Good, he said. You were carrying weight that wasn't yours to carry. We sat in comfortable silence, the kind you can only have with someone who's seen you at your worst and never looked away. That fall, I started volunteering at a financial literacy program for young women, teaching them about budgeting, boundaries, recognizing financial abuse. One evening, a girl about 22 raised her hand. What if it's family? She asked quietly. What if it's not a boyfriend, but your parents, and they say you owe them because they raised you? The room went still. I looked at her, saw myself at that age. You don't owe anyone your financial stability, I said. Not even family, especially not family who uses guilt as currency. She nodded slowly, wrote something in her notebook. After class, she waited by the door. My mom keeps asking me to co-sign loans, she said, and I feel terrible saying no because she says I'm abandoning her. Saying no isn't abandonment, I said. It's self-preservation, and the people who truly love you won't punish you for having boundaries. She looked at me for a long moment. How did you learn that? The hard way, I said. But you don't have to. She left looking steadier than when she'd arrived. I realized then that the worst parts of our lives can become the most useful parts. The things that break us can be exactly what someone else needs to see, to know they can survive being broken too. Winter came quietly. I spent Christmas with my father and David, no expensive restaurant this time, just my apartment, takeout Chinese food, and a Charlie Brown tree I'd bought from the grocery store. It was perfect. We played cards, watched old movies, fell asleep on the couch like we used to when I was a kid. Simple, real, paid for by nobody but ourselves. In January, I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "Thank you." I almost deleted it, but something made me open it. My name is Claire. I was sitting 3 tables away from you at the Harborview last spring. I watched what happened with your husband. I didn't understand what I was seeing at first, but over the next few weeks, I kept thinking about it. I'd been in a similar situation, paying for my partner's life while he told me I was lucky he loved me despite my flaws, funding his dreams while mine got smaller and smaller, watching you stand up for yourself, watching you walk away. It planted something in me. It took me 6 months, but I finally left. I have my own place now, my own money, my own life. I just wanted you to know that what you did that night changed more than just your life. It changed mine too. Thank you. I read it 3 times. Then I closed my laptop and looked out at the city. I thought about Marcus, about Linda and Gerald, about the version of myself who used to believe that love meant making yourself smaller so other people could feel bigger. I didn't hate them anymore. I didn't miss them either. I just felt grateful that I'd finally learned the difference between generosity and self-destruction, between supporting someone and disappearing into them. And I felt grateful that somewhere out there, other people were learning it too. Spring arrived with unexpected warmth, the kind that makes you want to open all the windows and let new air into old spaces. I was at a coffee shop one Saturday morning, working on some reports, when I overheard the conversation at the table next to me. A young woman, maybe mid-20s, was on the phone. Her voice was tired. I know, Mom. I know you need it. But I just paid your car insurance last month, and the month before that. A long pause. No, I can't co-sign for the loan. I already told you. My credit can't handle it. Another pause. Her shoulders dropped. Fine, I'll figure something out. But this is the last time. She hung up, sat there staring at her coffee. Her hands were shaking slightly. I knew that look. I'd worn it for years. For a moment, I considered staying quiet. It wasn't my business. She had to figure it out on her own like everyone does. But then I remembered Claire's email, the woman at the restaurant, the girl in my financial literacy class. Sometimes people just need to hear that what they're feeling has a name, that it's not normal, that they're allowed to stop. I turned slightly in my chair. I'm sorry, I said. I wasn't trying to listen, but I couldn't help overhearing. She looked up, startled, defensive. I just wanted to say one thing, I continued. You're allowed to say no, even to family, especially to family who treats your bank account like it's theirs. Her eyes filled with tears. She's my mother. I know, I said gently. But being someone's child doesn't mean you're responsible for funding their entire life. You can love someone and still have boundaries. She stared at me. How do you just stop? You decide that your future matters as much as their present, I said. And then you hold that decision even when they try to make you feel guilty for it. I wrote my email on a napkin and slid it across. If you ever need to talk to someone who's been there, I said. I'm here. I left before she could respond. I didn't know if she'd reach out. I didn't know if what I said would change anything, but I knew I'd said what I wished someone had said to me at 25. And sometimes, that's enough. That afternoon, I drove out to visit my father at his shop. He was under a car, cursing softly at a stubborn bolt. Need help? I called out. Need a miracle, he said, sliding out on the creeper. His face was streaked with grease, but he was smiling. What brings you by? Just wanted to see you. We sat on the curb outside, drinking cold sodas from the vending machine, watching the traffic pass. You seem settled, he said after a while. I am, I said. Finally. Good, he said. You earned it. We sat in comfortable silence, the kind that doesn't need to be filled. I'm proud of you, you know, he said quietly. Not for what you have, for what you walked away from. I leaned my head on his shoulder. Thanks, Dad. Anytime, kiddo. That night, I sat on my balcony watching the city lights flicker on as the sun set. My phone buzzed, an email from the woman at the coffee shop. I said no. For the first time in 3 years, I told my mother I couldn't help her. She hung up on me. I feel terrible, but I also feel something else. I think it might be relief. Thank you for giving me permission to choose myself. I smiled, set the phone down. The air was cool. The sky was turning that particular shade of purple that only happens right before dark. I thought about the version of myself who used to believe that her worth was measured by how much she could give away, who thought that love meant bleeding yourself dry for people who would never say thank you. I didn't miss her, but I was grateful she'd finally learned to stop. If you've ever felt like you had to earn your place in someone else's life, I want you to know something. You don't. The people who truly value you won't make you pay for the privilege of being loved. And walking away from people who treat you like an ATM isn't selfish. It's survival. If this story meant something to you, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment and let me know what city you're listening from and what time it is right now. Hit that like button and subscribe if you want to hear more stories like this. 2 more stories are coming up next that I think will really resonate with you. Thanks for listening. And remember, you're allowed to be your own family too.